It is evidence that you have been fighting. And I need you to understand the difference between those two things, because the confusion between them has been stealing something precious from you. You have looked at the tiredness in your bones, the heaviness behind your eyes, the way everything requires more effort than it used to, and you have interpreted all of it as proof that you are losing ground. But I am here to tell you something that will reshape the way you see this entire season. The weariness is not a symptom of defeat. It never was, and it is not now. It is a mark of endurance. It is the ache that comes from refusing to surrender when everything around you was begging you to quit. And that refusal, that stubborn, beautiful refusal, is something I placed inside you before you were ever born. Giving up was never written in your story. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Let it reach beyond the surface of quick encouragement and sink into the part of you that has been questioning whether any of this effort matters. Because I know that question has visited you. It arrives in the quiet hours, when distractions have gone, and silence fills the room. It whispers in a voice that sounds remarkably like reason. It says things like, "What is the point? Nothing is changing. Everyone else seems to move forward while you remain in the same place, doing the same things, and hoping for different results." And because that whisper wraps itself in logic, you have been tempted to believe it. But let me tell you exactly what that voice is missing. It is missing the view from where I stand. It cannot see what I see. It does not know what I know. And what I know is this. The ground beneath you is more solid than it has ever been, not because circumstances have improved, but because something inside you has gone deeper than it ever was before. Think about what a foundation actually is. Nobody celebrates a foundation. Nobody drives by a construction site during the earliest phase and takes photographs of the dirt and the rebar and the carefully poured concrete. It looks like nothing. It looks like a mess of materials and labor, producing something invisible. And if you did not understand the building process, you might walk by and wonder why anyone would spend so much time and effort on a hole in the ground. But every builder knows the truth. Ask anyone who has watched a building rise from empty ground, anyone who has participated in the process of turning a plot of dirt into something that shelters and serves and endures. They will tell you without hesitation that the foundation is the most important part of the entire structure. Without it, nothing stands. Without it, the most beautiful walls and the most impressive towers and the most carefully designed rooms would crumble at the first sign of pressure. Everything depends on what happens underground, in the unseen, in the phase that nobody applauds and nobody photographs and nobody posts about online, because there is nothing visually impressive about the most critical part of any building. That is where you are. You are in the foundation phase. The part of the process that produces nothing photogenic, nothing shareable, nothing that generates admiration from observers. It is the most thankless phase of any construction project, and simultaneously the most consequential. Everything that eventually rises into view will depend entirely on the quality of what is happening right now in the underground of your life. The walls that will one day shelter others will stand because of what you are enduring in this hidden season. The rooms that will one day hold joy and purpose and meaningful gatherings will exist because of the silent, invisible, uncelebrated work being done beneath them at this very moment. And I need you to stop apologizing for being in this phase. I need you to stop comparing your foundation season with someone else's decoration season. They are in a different chapter. Their timeline is not your blueprint. The fact that their walls are rising while you are still in the ground does not mean you are behind. It means we are building something that requires a different depth. And depth takes time. Real, unrushed, uncelebrated time. Time that feels wasted from the inside, but is being invested with a precision you will only appreciate in retrospect. I have watched you look at other people's lives and wonder what they did differently, why their prayers seem to be answered faster, why their struggles seem to resolve more cleanly, why their stories seem to include shorter chapters of difficulty and longer chapters of blessing. But you are comparing your behind-the-scenes footage with their highlight reel. And that comparison is dishonest even when it feels convincing. You do not know what they endured in their foundation season. You do not know what they lost, or what they wrestled with, or what they almost gave up before the thing you admire was finally built. You only see what is standing now. You do not see what it cost. And if you did, if you could peel back the finished surfaces and see the struggle embedded in the structure, you would realize that their foundation season looked remarkably like yours, because deep foundations are never built easily. They are built through persistent labor in conditions that feel overwhelming at the time and make sense only after the building is complete. There are people in your life who look at what is visible and draw conclusions that break my heart because they are so far from the truth. They see the struggle and call it stagnation. They see the waiting and call it wasted time. They see the tears and call it weakness. But I am the architect of what is happening in you, and I can tell you with absolute authority that nothing about this season is wasted. The struggle is developing a tenacity that comfort could never produce. The waiting is cultivating a patience that will become one of your greatest assets when the acceleration begins. And the tears are watering ground that is about to produce a harvest so abundant that the memory of the planting season will be completely overshadowed by the joy of what grows. If they could understand the purpose behind the process they are observing, they would stop offering advice and start offering awe. Because what is happening in you is not a problem to be solved. It is a masterwork in progress, and masterworks are never completed quickly. They are completed thoroughly. I have been watching you, not from a distance, not the way a supervisor watches from an office window. I have been beside you in every moment of this season, close enough to feel what you feel, near enough to catch the words you mumble when you think nobody is listening. I heard what you said on the difficult nights when the weight of everything pressed down so hard that breathing felt like labor. I heard the prayers that started strong and then dissolved into sighs because the words would not come. I heard the conversations you had with yourself, where you tried to talk yourself into continuing for just one more day. The negotiations you conducted with your own exhaustion, bargaining for a few more hours of determination before the weariness could claim the final portion of your resolve. And I want you to know that every single one of those moments registered with me, not as evidence of weakness, as evidence of war. You have been fighting a war against surrender, and every day that you choose to continue is a battle won. The world does not hand out medals for this kind of fighting. There are no ceremonies for the person who simply refused to stop getting back up. No applause for the act of dragging yourself to your feet one more time after being knocked flat by circumstances that outweighed you in every measurable way. But I keep records that the world does not know about. And in those records, your name appears on the list of those who endured when endurance seemed impossible. That list is more exclusive and more honored than any list that has ever been compiled on earth. I know about the specific burdens you carry. Let me name some of them so you understand the depth of my awareness. The financial pressure that turns every expense into a negotiation. The way you calculate and recalculate, trying to make the numbers work when they stubbornly refuse to cooperate. The anxiety that arrives uninvited with every unexpected bill, every car repair that you cannot postpone, every medical expense that appears without regard for the limits of what the budget can absorb. The way the numbers run through your mind, even in moments that should be free from calculation. The mental arithmetic that operates in the background of every meal, every trip to the store, every decision about what can be afforded and what must wait. You have been carrying this weight with a composure that impresses me, not because I did not know you were capable of it, but because watching courage in action never fails to move me, even though I am the one who placed it there. You have made sacrifices that nobody counted. You have gone without so that others could have. You have said yes to responsibilities that were not strictly yours because someone had to do it, and you were unwilling to let the people you love suffer from the neglect. That kind of quiet sacrifice is the material I build with. It is stronger than steel and more durable than stone, and I have been collecting every single instance of it and incorporating it into the foundation. There is the relational tension that has been draining you in ways that do not show on the surface. The strained conversation with someone you love that ended without resolution and has been replaying in your mind ever since. A distance that has grown between you and a person who once stood close, a distance neither of you fully understands, and both of you feel powerless to bridge. The loneliness that arrives even in crowded rooms, because the connections around you have become functional rather than meaningful. And the difference between those two things is vast enough to ache in. I see all of this. I see how the relational exhaustion compounds the financial exhaustion, which compounds the spiritual exhaustion, until the entire load feels like it exceeds the carrying capacity of one human life. And here is what I want you to hear. The load does exceed the carrying capacity of one human life. That is exactly why you were never designed to carry it alone. And the fact that you have been trying to, the fact that you have been shouldering loads that were meant to be shared because you did not want to burden anyone else, that tells me something about the way you love. It tells me that you would rather absorb discomfort yourself than distribute it to the people around you. That instinct is noble in many ways, but it becomes damaging when it prevents you from receiving the help that I am sending through the very people you are trying to protect. Let me be clear about this. Accepting help is not weakness, it is wisdom. And I have positioned specific people in your life who are able and willing to carry portions of what you have been shouldering solo. Letting them in is not burdening them. It is honoring the purpose for which they were placed near you. I also know about the spiritual fatigue. The way prayer has started to feel more like a discipline than a conversation. The way reading my word has become a task to complete rather than a table to sit at. The way worship that once lifted you now sometimes feels like lifting a weight. This is not a sign that your relationship with me is failing. It is a sign that you are human and you are tired, and the emotional reserves that fuel the expressions of spiritual engagement have been drawn down by the relentless demands of this particular season. The connection between us does not require you to feel inspired in order to be real. It does not need worship songs and tears of joy to remain intact. Some of the most profound moments of communion between us happened when you sat in silence, too tired to form words, too drained to generate emotion, and simply existed in my presence without performing. Do not be alarmed by the dryness. Do not interpret it as distance. It is proximity under pressure. A compressed spring looks smaller than a relaxed one, but it holds more energy. Your spiritual life is compressed right now. It is not diminished. It is loaded. And when the pressure eases, the expansion will surprise you. Let me address something that the discouragement has been whispering about your worth. It has been suggesting that the difficulty of this season is somehow proportional to your value, that if you mattered more, things would be easier, that the people whose lives appear smoother must have done something right that you have failed to do. This is a lie so subtle that it passes through most defenses undetected. It dresses itself in false humility and masquerades as honest self-assessment. But underneath the disguise, it is pure deception. Your worth was established before a single one of these circumstances came into existence. It was declared in the act of your creation, woven into the first breath you drew, confirmed in the price I paid for your redemption, a price so extravagant that it should settle the question of your value permanently. It does not fluctuate with your bank account. It does not decrease when relationships fracture. It does not diminish when plans fail, or when prayers seem to produce silence instead of answers. Nothing that happens to you changes what is true about you. And what is true about you is this: you are mine, completely, irreversibly, unconditionally mine. And what belongs to me does not go unfinished. I do not begin things I am unable or unwilling to complete. I do not invest in projects I intend to abandon. I do not pour love and sacrifice and attention into a life only to walk away when the process enters its most demanding phase. That is not who I am. It has never been who I am. And the discouragement that suggests otherwise is working with outdated intelligence and fabricated evidence. Now let me speak to the voices that have been contributing to your discouragement. Not the internal ones, the external ones. The people who have looked at your life and offered opinions they were never qualified to give. Some of them meant well. They genuinely believed they were helping when they suggested that perhaps you were doing something wrong, that maybe your approach needed changing, that possibly the reason things had not shifted yet was because of some deficiency in your effort, or your attitude, or your faith. Their words carried a particular sting, because they landed on soil that was already tender. You were already questioning the same things, and hearing someone else articulate those doubts gave them a weight and a credibility they did not deserve. And because you respected the relationship enough to consider their input honestly, you gave those words space to root. You turned them over in your mind, examining them from multiple angles, wondering if the feedback was accurate, even though it came wrapped in tones that felt more like condemnation than correction. Let me save you the mental energy of that investigation. The answer is no. The assessment was not accurate. It was a projection of their own limitations onto your situation. They judged the outside of a process they have never experienced from the inside, and their conclusions were predictably wrong. Others were not well-intentioned at all. They watched your struggle and found in it a mirror they did not want to look into. So instead of examining their own reflection, they chose to critique yours. They pointed at your unfinished building and made pronouncements about its future, as though they could see the blueprints. They cannot. The blueprints are between you and me, and what is on those blueprints would silence every critic if they could see even a fraction of what I have planned. Then there are the people who simply left. The ones who were present during easier seasons and gradually disappeared when the landscape changed. Their absence hurt in a particular way, because it revealed something about the nature of the connection. Fair weather companions are common, and discovering that someone you counted as an all-season friend was actually a fair weather guest creates a disorientation that goes beyond the loss itself. It makes you question the accuracy of every other relationship assessment you have ever made. But I want to redirect that questioning. Instead of asking what is wrong with your judgment, ask what is right about the sifting process. Because that is what happened. The difficulty sifted. It separated. It revealed. And what remains after sifting is more trustworthy than what was present before it. I did not engineer the betrayals. I do not choreograph the cruelty of human decisions or script the disappointing choices that free will sometimes produces. But I am extraordinarily skilled at using the aftermath of those choices to reposition you with greater accuracy than you occupied before the disruption. I take the rubble that human failure leaves behind, and I build stepping stones out of it. I take the empty space that abandonment creates, and I fill it with something more aligned with the direction you are actually headed. The people who walked away created space. And that space was not empty. It was reserved. Reserved for connections that can survive pressure, reserved for relationships that are built on substance rather than convenience, reserved for bonds that will still be standing when the storm season has passed. The enemies and critics who attacked you with words designed to wound, they need to understand something that most of them never will. The words they spoke against you did not travel in one direction. Those words boomeranged. What was intended to diminish you actually revealed them. Their cruelty exposed their own interior poverty, not yours. A person who is at peace with themselves does not invest energy in dismantling someone else. The effort they spent trying to undermine your confidence was evidence of a threat they perceived in your potential. You do not attack what you consider insignificant. You attack what you fear might succeed. Forgive them. I say this not because they deserve your forgiveness, but because you deserve the freedom that forgiveness provides. Unforgiveness is a chain that attaches you to the person who hurt you and forces you to drag them with you into every new room you enter. It is exhausting and it is unnecessary. Release them. Not because the offense was small, but because your future is large and carrying the weight of resentment into it would cost you more than any apology they could ever offer. Forgiving does not mean what happened was acceptable. It means you have decided that what happened does not get to define the trajectory of where you go from here. And here is what I promise you regarding the people who sought to destroy what I am building in you. Their schemes have an expiration date that they are unaware of. The plots they formed against your well-being are collapsing under the weight of their own malice. I do not need to punish them the way you might expect. The natural consequence of living in opposition to someone I am protecting is that every weapon formed against you malfunctions. Every trap they set catches their own feet. Every lie they spread eventually circles back to reveal the character of the one who spoke it, rather than the one it was spoken about. You do not need to defend yourself against these people. Your defense is my responsibility, and I take it seriously. I also want to speak to the way you have been handling the criticism internally. You have been replaying conversations and confrontations long after they ended, analyzing every word, wondering if perhaps the harsh things said about you contain grains of truth you should examine. And there is wisdom in honest self-reflection. But there is a difference between examining yourself in my light and examining yourself through the lens of someone who does not love you. My light reveals areas for growth with gentleness and purpose. Their words reveal nothing except their own frustration and envy. Stop using their criticism as a diagnostic tool. It was never designed to help you. It was designed to halt you. And the fact that it has caused you to slow down is already more influence than it ever deserved. You are stronger than the opinions that have been thrown at you. Not because you are impervious to words, because you are not, and I did not make you to be, but because the words that ultimately define your identity and your future are the ones that come from me. And my words about you have never changed. My assessment of your potential has never been downgraded. The purpose I assign to your life has never been revoked or reassigned to someone else, because I grew impatient with your pace. You are who I said you are, and that declaration carries more authority than every critic who has ever lived combined. Let me tell you about the specific dream that discouragement has been trying to bury. You know the one I am talking about, the one you held so close to your chest that you barely spoke it aloud, for fear that exposing it to the open air would somehow make it more vulnerable, the one you prayed about with a fervency that surprised even you, the one you worked toward with a dedication that cost you comfort and convenience, and sometimes the approval of people who could not understand why you would sacrifice so much for something that had not yet materialized. That dream is alive. It is not just alive. It is growing in the dark, the same way every significant living thing grows before it becomes visible. A seed does not announce its progress to the soil around it. It simply pushes, slowly, relentlessly, in complete obscurity, it pushes. And one day, without warning, something green appears where only dirt existed before. The spectators see the emergence and call it sudden, but the seed knows the truth. The emergence was the culmination of a long and silent labor that began the moment it was buried. Your dream is in the pushing phase. The burying was not a funeral. It was a planting. And the difference between the two is everything. I know how much it cost you to hold on to that dream, while circumstances seem to be doing everything in their power to make you release it. People around you, some of them people who care about you genuinely, suggested it was time to be realistic. They used the word practical, as though practicality and faith occupied the same dictionary. They told you to lower the bar, to accept the limitations of your current reality, to stop hoping for something that seemed statistically unlikely. And part of you heard them. Part of you considered letting go, not because you agreed, but because holding on was using strength you were not sure you had left, but you held. You held the dream the way a person in deep water holds a life preserver. Not because holding is comfortable, but because releasing it means going under. And I watched you hold it, through the financial impossibility of it, through the relational cost of it, through the emotional drain of investing hope in something that kept failing to appear on schedule. You held it because somewhere beneath the fatigue, deeper than the discouragement could reach, you sensed that the dream was not just a wish. It was a word, my word, spoken over your life before you were old enough to remember hearing it. I need you to stop interpreting the delay as denial. A delayed answer and a denied request are so fundamentally different that confusing them is like confusing sleep with death. The sleeping person appears motionless. The dead person appears motionless. But one is gathering strength for waking, and the other will not rise at all. What looks like stillness in your dream is not the stillness of death. It is the stillness of incubation. Something is forming. Something is gathering strength, developing complexity, preparing itself for a life outside the womb of waiting. And I am the one overseeing that development, making sure that every component is properly formed before the moment of emergence arrives. I have never delivered an unfinished answer to a sincere prayer. I have never released something premature simply because the person asking grew impatient with the timeline. My timing accounts for factors that impatience cannot see. It considers the readiness of the receiver, the condition of the environment, the alignment of supporting circumstances, and the long-term sustainability of what is being given. A gift delivered into an unprepared life does not bless. It overwhelms. And I love you too much to overwhelm you with something I designed to bring you peace. The timing matters in ways you cannot currently appreciate. If I gave you everything you asked for at the exact moment you asked for it, without regard for what the timing would do to the gift, or what the gift would do to you, the result would not be the blessing you imagine. It would be a burden disguised as a gift, a weight presented in wrapping paper. Because receiving something before you are structurally prepared to hold it does not lead to joy. It leads to collapse. I have seen it happen countless times. People who received what they wanted before they became who they needed to be. The very thing they celebrated became the thing that crushed them. I will not do that to you. The waiting is protection. The delay is development. The silence is strategic. And every second that passes between the prayer and its answer is being used with a precision that accounts for variables you cannot see from where you stand. Your work has not been invisible to me. The effort you pour into your responsibilities each day, the diligence you bring to tasks that feel repetitive and unrewarding, the way you show up and give your best even when your best feels insufficient, all of it is observed and all of it is valued. I am going to prosper the labor of your hands, not as an abstract promise floating somewhere in a distant future, but as a concrete intention that is already being executed. The prosperity may not arrive in the form you expect. It rarely does. My provision tends to surprise the recipient because I factor in needs that the person has not yet identified, but it will arrive in the form you actually need, which has consistently proven throughout history to be superior to the form the person originally imagined. I see the full picture of your life, including the chapters you have not yet entered, and I provision accordingly. Your debts will be addressed. I say that plainly because plain truth deserves plain speech. The financial pressure that has been squeezing the margins of your daily existence until there is barely room to breathe, until generosity feels like a luxury you can no longer afford, even though your heart aches to give. That pressure has an expiration date. Not because I am indifferent to the present tightness, but because the resolution involves more than just money. It involves restructuring the way provision flows into your life, redirecting channels that have been blocked, opening pathways that have been closed, and establishing new streams of blessing that did not exist before this season began. Some of those streams are being created right now, in the very circumstances you are asking me to change. The job that feels stagnant is actually soil where I am planting something. The skill you have been forced to develop because of the limitation, that skill is going to be the key that unlocks a door you do not know about yet. I work like that frequently. I use constraints to develop competencies that would never emerge in conditions of abundance. The struggle with the budget taught you resourcefulness. The frustration of limited options taught you creativity. The necessity of doing more with less built in you an efficiency that people who always had enough never needed to learn. These are not consolation prizes. These are strategic advantages being forged in the furnace of limitation. And when the limitation lifts, and it will lift, the skills remain. They become permanent features of who you are, tools you carry into every future season, regardless of whether that season is characterized by scarcity or abundance. Your family is on my heart as much as it is on yours. the concerns you carry for the people you love, the desire to provide for them not just materially, but emotionally and spiritually, the weight of feeling responsible for their well-being, even in areas where control is not something you possess. I hold all of those concerns alongside you. The health of the people close to you, the direction their lives are heading, the choices they make that sometimes cause you more anxiety than your own choices do. None of these are outside my field of attention. I am working in their lives with the same precision and commitment with which I am working in yours. Some of the delays in your own life are connected to timing considerations that involve the people around you. Blessings do not arrive in isolation. They arrive in ecosystems. And I am coordinating the timing of multiple lives to ensure that when the breakthrough comes, it comes in a way that blesses not just you, but the entire network of people your life touches. I want you to reconsider the way you are looking at the obstacles. Every wall you have encountered, every door that refused to open, every path that ended in what appeared to be a dead end, none of these were punishments. They were redirections. I was steering you away from destinations that would have harmed you, even though those destinations looked desirable from your perspective. A closed door does not always mean no. Sometimes it means not here. Sometimes it means not yet. Sometimes it means I have something better in the next corridor, but you will never find it if you keep banging on this one. Trust the closed doors. They have protected you more often than you realize. And the frustration you felt standing in front of them was a temporary emotion that will be replaced by gratitude when you finally see what was behind the door that did open. Some of those closed doors were protecting you from people who would have taken advantage of the opportunity to get close to your resources without caring about your soul. Others were shielding you from environments that looked attractive on the surface, but contained elements that would have eroded the very qualities I am building in you. And some of those doors were simply closed, because the corridor they led to would have taken you in a direction where the dream in your heart could never have survived. I close doors the same way a good parent removes sharp objects from a child's reach, not to deprive, but to protect. And the child's frustration at not being able to grasp the shiny, dangerous thing does not change the wisdom of the parent who moved it. This is a good place to remind you of something fundamental about the way I operate. I am always working. Even when you cannot see the evidence of my activity, I am moving pieces, adjusting timelines, redirecting circumstances, softening hearts, opening channels, closing vulnerabilities, and arranging outcomes with an attention to detail that would astonish you if you could observe the full scope of it. The silence you sometimes experience is not inactivity. It is the quietest and most complex phase of the operation. A surgeon does not narrate the most delicate part of the procedure. Complete concentration requires complete quiet. And there are parts of what I am doing in your life right now that require the kind of focused intervention that cannot be accompanied by commentary. Trust the silence. It is not the silence of someone who has left the room. It is not the silence of indifference or forgetfulness or preoccupation with something more important. It is the silence of someone who is performing the most critical and most delicate work with the highest level of care and the fullest concentration. Let me speak now about perseverance itself, because you have been measuring it against the wrong standard. You think perseverance means never wanting to quit. That is not perseverance. That is something closer to numbness. Real perseverance means wanting to quit, feeling the full gravitational pull of surrender, acknowledging that stopping would bring immediate relief, and then choosing to take one more step anyway. If quitting held no appeal whatsoever, if it were not a real and present option, then continuing would require no courage at all. The attractiveness of giving up is precisely what makes going forward meaningful. And going forward is what you have been doing. Messily, imperfectly, with more tears than you anticipated, and less certainty than you would have preferred, with a limp some days and a crawl on others, and occasionally on your hands and knees, because standing was not an option, but stopping was not acceptable either. The record shows that you kept moving, and I keep meticulous records, records that the world cannot access and discouragement cannot edit. Records that tell the true story of a person who was given every reason to stop and chose, over and over and over again, not to. Giving up was never written in your story. I want to address the guilt you carry about the moments when your faith wavered. You treat those moments as evidence against yourself, as marks on a permanent record that will be reviewed and held against you at some future accounting. But that is not how I work. When your confidence crumbled, I did not step back. When you said things in frustration that you would never say in calmer moments, I did not add those words to a ledger of grievances. I understood them as the overflow of a heart under extreme pressure. Water under intense heat transforms into steam and escapes in whatever direction is available. The venting was not betrayal, it was physics, and I designed those pressure release mechanisms into your system because I knew exactly how much heat this season would generate. There are specific failures you carry, not as lessons absorbed, but as permanent disqualifications. Moments when you fell short of the person you wanted to be, when the gap between your intentions and your actions was wide enough to walk through. You have confessed some of these things, but never fully released them, because part of you believes that receiving grace for the same weakness repeatedly is somehow testing the limits of my patience. Let me dissolve that fear entirely. My grace is not a reservoir with a depletion point. It is not a container that empties when too many people draw from it simultaneously. It is a river fed by a spring that has no bottom and no walls and no mechanism for exhaustion. The fact that you keep returning to me with familiar battles, with the same weaknesses wearing slightly different clothes each time, does not frustrate me. It confirms that you know where to go when you fall. That instinct to turn toward me, rather than away from me when shame says hide, is itself a form of wisdom that cannot be taught in any classroom. It can only be learned in the lived experience of falling and then choosing, again and again, to bring the broken pieces to the one who knows how they fit together. Stop punishing yourself for not being further along than you are. I say this with every ounce of tenderness a father's heart can hold. Stop adding self-condemnation to a load that is already heavier than any single person should bear. The weight of circumstances is enough, without you piling guilt on top of it for not carrying those circumstances with a perfectly composed attitude. I never asked for perfection in the process. I asked for presence. I asked you to show up, not without complaints, not without tears or questions or moments where doubt lasted longer than you thought appropriate. I simply asked you to show up, and you have, inconsistently at times, reluctantly on certain occasions, with dragging feet and heavy eyelids and a heart that sometimes felt like it was operating on its last reserves of determination. But you showed up, and that counts in a way that no accounting system on earth can quantify. The angels record the showing up. Heaven notes it. I treasure it, because the showing up, especially the reluctant and weary and barely holding it together showing up, is the raw material of a resilience that will define the rest of your existence. My forgiveness covers the places where you feel most exposed. The sins you committed in moments of weakness, the choices you made when loneliness or anger or desperation overrode the values you hold in your clearer moments, the thoughts you entertained that you would be mortified for anyone to know about. All of it falls within the scope of a grace that does not pick and choose which offenses it will address. Bring it to me, all of it, not the edited version that omits the parts you find most shameful, not the summary that skips over the details you cannot face. Bring the raw, unfiltered, complete truth of who you are and what you have done, and watch what happens when it meets a love that already knew every detail before you gathered the courage to speak them. My forgiveness does not have a usage limit. If you fall again, and you may because you are human, and the pressures of living in a broken world create conditions where even the strongest people stumble, I will not greet your return with a lecture about how many times we have been through this before. I will greet you the way I always greet those who come back, with arms that were never closed, with a door that was never locked, with a welcome that does not require an appointment or a resume of improved behavior. Just come, as you are, where you are, with whatever is left of you after the fall. It will be enough. It has always been enough. The season you are walking through has a purpose that I want to make visible to you, not because understanding the purpose makes the season less difficult, but because it changes the narrative from random affliction to intentional development. Nothing you are experiencing is wasted. Not the waiting that stretches patience to its thinnest possible membrane. Not the confusion that makes every decision feel like a gamble. Not the rejection that sends you back to the drawing board with less confidence than you had before. Not the silence from me that sometimes feels less like sacred mystery and more like abandonment. Every element has been factored into a design that accounts for outcomes you cannot yet imagine. I see the completed version of what is being constructed in your life. I hold the finished blueprints in my hands while you stand in the middle of the construction zone, surrounded by noise and dust and exposed wiring. And I can tell you without hesitation that when you finally see the finished work, the foundation season will make complete sense. You will look back at this exact period, this stretch of discouragement and weariness and questioning, and something will click into place. You will say to yourself, now I understand why it took so long. Now I see why it had to go that deep. Now I know why I could not skip that part, even though I begged to. The understanding will come. It always does. But it comes after the construction, not during it. And asking a person to appreciate a building while they are standing in the middle of its unfinished frame is asking the impossible. So I do not ask that of you. I ask only that you trust the architect. Let me paint the picture more clearly. There is something coming for you that exceeds the dimensions of what your current imagination can hold. You have been praying for relief, and relief is part of what is on its way. But relief is the smallest component of what I have prepared. Beyond relief, there is restoration. Beyond restoration, there is expansion. Beyond expansion, there is an influence and an impact and a reach that has your name on it, but extends far beyond anything you could accomplish in your own strength. The trials you are enduring are developing the exact qualities required to steward what is coming. Without the patience forged in waiting, the blessing would make you impulsive. Without the humility formed through failure, the promotion would make you arrogant. Without the compassion built through personal suffering, the platform would make you indifferent to the pain of others. Without the dependence on me developed through seasons of insufficiency, The abundance would make you self-reliant in ways that would slowly disconnect you from the source of everything good. Every quality the season is producing has a corresponding responsibility in the chapter that follows. And I am too good of a builder to let you walk into the next chapter without the tools it requires. Do not envy anyone else's process. The apparent ease you observe in their lives may be genuine, or it may be a curated presentation that hides their own underground labor. Either way, their blueprint has nothing to do with yours. I am not constructing the same structure in every life. The depth of your foundation corresponds directly to the height of what I intend to build above it. And I intend to build something in your life that will require significant depth, something that serves as shelter for others when storms hit their lives, something that stands firm when lesser structures around it buckle under pressure they were not reinforced to bear, something that still functions decades from now when the circumstances that currently feel like threats have been forgotten by everyone, including you. Take that as the compliment it is. The intensity of the process reflects the magnitude of the plan. Small plans require small foundations. What I am building in you is not small. The discouragement wants you to believe that this is all there is, that this season of struggle is the final chapter, that the story plateaus here and never climbs again. But discouragement is a terrible narrator. It takes the midpoint of the story and presents it as the conclusion. It shows you Act 2 and insists there is no Act 3. But I wrote the entire script. I know every scene. And I can tell you with the authority of someone who has never been wrong about anything that this is not how your story ends. This is the tension before the resolution. This is the compression before the expansion. This is the silence before the music that has already been composed and rehearsed and is waiting only for the conductor to lift the baton. And the music, when it comes, will be worth every second of silence that preceded it. The patience I am cultivating in you is not passive. It is not sitting motionless while hoping something changes. The patience I am developing is active and muscular and deliberate. It is the patience of a farmer who plants and then continues laboring the ground. Not because he can make the seed grow faster, but because there is always productive work to do, while the invisible growth happens beneath the surface. Pull the weeds that compete for nutrients. Repair the fences that protect the crop. Prepare the storage for a harvest that is not yet broken through the soil, but is certainly on its way. This is active patience. It works in the present while trusting in the future. It refuses to interpret delay as denial. It labors and waits at the same time because it understands those two activities are complementary rather than contradictory. Passive waiting says, if it is meant to be, it will happen without me. Active patience says it is meant to be, and my participation in the process is part of how it happens. Be the second kind. Work while you wait. Prepare while you trust. Build capacity in the present for the blessing that is on its way. There is provision approaching you right now that matches the specific shape of needs you have never vocalized to anyone. The financial tension that makes planning feel futile. The health concern you carry in isolation, researching symptoms and possibilities during quiet hours while telling everyone who asks that everything is fine, maintaining a composure that costs more energy than most people will ever understand. The relational absence that loneliness fills with its own particular brand of quiet ache. None of these needs are invisible to me, and none of them fall outside the boundaries of what I am actively resolving. My work in your life is comprehensive. It does not address one area while overlooking another. It moves through every room, every closet, every forgotten corner where something damaged has been stored away because you did not know what else to do with it. I know what to do with all of it, and I am already doing it. So here is what I want you to do with the discouragement. Do not fight it. Fighting gives it the dignity of a worthy opponent, and it does not deserve that honor. Instead, acknowledge it the way you would acknowledge a cloud passing across the face of the sun. It is real. It exists. It has temporarily reduced the warmth reaching your skin, but it is moving. It has no roots. It does not own the sky. The sun has not relocated. It is still blazing at full power behind the temporary obstruction, and the cloud possesses neither the permanence nor the density to remain indefinitely. Your discouragement is a cloud. My promises are the sun. One is a passing atmospheric condition. The other is an eternal source of light that preceded every shadow ever cast and will outlast every darkness that has ever existed. I want to leave you with something to carry like a stone in your pocket, something solid and smooth and graspable for whenever the weariness arrives to rewrite the narrative again. Everything I begin, I complete. Not most things. Not the projects that cost less than expected. Not only the plans that encountered minimal resistance. Everything. Every work I initiate reaches its intended conclusion. Every word I speak travels until it finds fulfillment. Every promise I make arrives at its destination regardless of the obstacles it encounters along the way. The timeline may differ from what you imagined. The route may include detours you did not anticipate. The process may involve seasons that feel counterproductive from where you are standing. But the completion rate is absolute. It has always been absolute. And your situation will not be the exception that breaks that perfect record. You are not stuck. You are anchored. There is a difference so vast between those two states that confusing them changes everything about the way you interpret your circumstances. Stuck is involuntary imprisonment in a location you did not choose. Anchored is deliberate positioning in a location selected for strategic purpose. You look at the lack of forward motion and see failure. I look at the same stillness and see stability. The anchor is not punishment. It is protection. It keeps you from drifting into currents that would carry you to places where the water is too deep and the help is too far away, and the damage would take years to undo. Especially during storms when the temptation to let go and float wherever the waves push feels like freedom, but is actually the most dangerous form of surrender available. Giving up was never written in your story. Stand firm, not because standing is comfortable, but because what you are standing on is unshakable. Not because the wind has stopped, but because the structure beneath your feet was engineered to handle pressures that have not even arrived yet. Not because all the questions have been answered, but because my character does not require your understanding to continue operating in your favor. You are not behind. You are being prepared. You are not forgotten. You are being positioned. You are not failing. You are being forged, and the forge makes no apology for its temperature because it knows what emerges from the other side. I love you with a love that does not adjust itself based on your output or your performance or the current state of your circumstances. It remains steady because it originates from who I am, not from anything you produce. And who I am does not change, ever. The builder does not abandon the project because the concrete is curing slowly. The father does not leave because the child stumbles while learning to walk. And I do not withdraw my commitment to your life because the current chapter is harder and longer. and more confusing than the chapters that came before. Stay. Stay in the process, even when the process makes no sense to you. Stay in the discomfort, even when easier options present themselves at the low cost of quitting. Stay in the space between what was promised and what has been fulfilled. Because that space, the very gap that feels like nothing is happening, is where the deepest transformation takes place. That is where belief graduates from theory to lived conviction. That is where everything you have heard about me becomes everything you have personally experienced with me. And once experience has built something in you, no argument and no voice and no season of discouragement can take it apart. What is built through personal encounter with me is indestructible. No philosophy can dismantle it. No season of doubt can erase it. No clever argument can convince you that what you experienced was not real. Once you have lived it, it becomes part of you in a way that transcends belief and enters the territory of knowing. I wrote every chapter of your narrative, every single one, the bright ones and the dark ones, the short ones that passed like a breath, and the long ones that seemed to stretch beyond the borders of endurance. And I do not include surrender in the stories of those I love. I include struggle because struggle produces strength. I include honest tears because tears water the ground for future growth. I include seasons that press against the outermost limits of what a person believes they can withstand. But I never write an ending that contradicts my nature. And my nature is faithfulness. My nature is completion. My nature is following through on every single thing I have declared concerning your life, no matter how many seasons stand between the declaration and its visible arrival. So take this word deep into the architecture of who you are. Let it settle into the foundation alongside the concrete and the prayers and the years of persistent trust that have already been poured there. Let it fill every crack where discouragement has been probing for entry. And when the weariness visits again, because it will return at least once more before this season ends, let this be the first voice you hear, not the voice of comparison, not the voice of self-accusation, not the voice of impatience disguised as spiritual urgency. Let it be my voice, steady and sure, unwavering and warm, full of a commitment to you that has never, not for one fraction of 1 second, considered the possibility of giving up on what I started. I am finishing what I began in you. And what I began is extraordinary. You can rest in that, deeply, completely, without reservation, without qualification, without the nagging fear that the promise might expire before it reaches you. It will reach you. It is already on its way. Amen. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear these words today. Type Amen in the comments to receive this blessing and to declare that you will not give up. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a message from God. Every word spoken here is meant to strengthen your faith, lift your spirit, and remind you that you are deeply loved. Share this video right now and be a blessing to someone who is going through a difficult season